What's up, War Room? Welcome back to another Discord Q&A, Mount Rushmore edition. Joined as always by Connor Rogers. We're recording the War Room video tonight. We're recording the pod after. We're locked and loaded. We got a shit ton to talk about, even though it's almost Memorial Day weekend. There's never quiet times. Connor, how you doing? How you feeling? Drafting the rearview mirror, man squan on the horizon for the summer.
Right.
It's good times now.
It really is. It's a little bit of that time of rest and catch up on all the things that, boy, nobody kicks the things down the road like me during the draft. There's like a 2-month period leading up to the draft where I put a lot of responsibilities aside. So that's basically what my entire month of May is. I'm also planning a wedding, which is a little bit of an interesting
Just a small detail.
Yeah, small detail. So I am crawling or trying to sprint to Memorial Day weekend and get through the film rooms now too, which everybody knows is what I like to do. I like when things are kind of slow and I could really get through a ton of tape and turn it into content. So the Abanikanda film room is obviously on the feed now. Snuck that in there on Tuesday, so we'll basically have content rolling out each day. And it was good to get back into Izzy's film and really talk over it because I think a lot of what's said about him is true, and then I think some of it is also narrative that's not necessarily or that's lacking projecting the kind of player he could be. So it was a lot of fun. And this is a time of year, Joe, where you and I can kind of plan things and make the brand a lot better and stronger and have fun with it. So this is a great time of year.
Yeah, obviously highly recommend the Izzy film room. Really insightful and a guy I'm very excited about. And as you said, this is where we can have a little fun and do some of our rewatchables. We're going to be layering in some more interviews and some other different things that we can do when we're not in the regularity of free agency, the draft, and the season. Now, for our Q&A, we basically got 3 different questions from Alex Antaki in the Q&A that we're going to just roll into one. They were all Mount Rushmores of initially Joe Douglas questions and then an overall Jet question. The first one was basically, what is the Mount Rushmore of Joe Douglas's moves as the Jets GM? Basically his 4 best moves. A lot of different things were thrown out in the Discord. The initial things that clicked in my mind, and I think clicked in most people's mind, the Jamal Adams trade. Incredible value on that deal. It just looks better and better with time. I included the Darnold deal because I know even though everyone's a little excited about Sam this year, getting a 2nd, 4th, and 6th for what he's been to date, I still think pretty damn good. And I know it didn't work with Zach Wilson, but the process was right because it was time to move on from Sam. And ultimately the road led to Aaron Rodgers. So I'll celebrate that. Now I forgot to include Aaron Rodgers in my initial 4 because it still has it like locked in my brain that the Jets traded for Aaron Mother effing Rodgers, but that immediately has to be in the Mount Rushmore. Even if it doesn't work out to the extent that we hope, the process was there, and getting him, I think, has to be in the top 4. I think outside of that, it's sort of like a garden variety of what you like. I kind of thought about the DJ Reed free agent signing because of just how good he was, and there hasn't been a lot of like big free agency wins for the Jets. So getting him on the value that they did with how great he was in year 1 kind of came top of mind to me. But you also, if you're going to include Rodgers, irregardless of result, you have to find a spot in the top 4 for Sauce and Garrett Wilson at 4 and 10, right? Now, they're high picks, so you expect your high picks to be good, but not necessarily that good. And they could have went other directions at 4. They could have went other directions at 10. That has to be in the top for me. So I think for 4 or 5 things that kind of come across, what comes to mind for you? And then we're going to balance this out on the other half with his Mount Rushmore of his worst moves.
So this is interesting to me because I'm looking at it and trying to think like moves. I always try to think like creativity, and like the Jamal Adams trade was obviously one where when you look at that situation, that's a situation where they were able to analyze that they could get a ridiculous amount of value on the player at the exact right time, right? He was due to get paid. The return for him was phenomenal. The return that they got and the way they used the assets was incredible as well. So I don't know like how you count. Do you count just the trade as the move, or does the players they drafted also count as well? But I think no matter what, I think all of that just has to be on there. There's no way around it. That's far and away his best move. Obviously, trading for Aaron Rodgers could go down as his best move. We'll see how it plays out. But when you get the kind of core pieces that they were able to land, while also trading a player that wasn't happy in Jamal Adams, while also getting value for him that was just overwhelming because
Yep.
he's not really the type of player you'd want to pay anyway, what he got paid. That's a good one. I agree with you. The Reed signing, I think, is on there. I really do. Let's assume that the Jamal Adams trade as a whole is on there. The Aaron Rodgers trade is on there. It's tricky, right? Do draft picks like Sauce could go down? I mean, Sauce can really be one of the best. It could be a top 3 corner in the league by the end of this year, and
Yeah.
he was kind of pushing for that as a rookie, which is just absurd. So that's where it gets really interesting. It's tough. It really, really is. I thought Reed was so good last year, considering what they paid him and how much they missed at that position for a long time in free agency, or really just missed in free agency as a whole. I think the Reed one is on there. I would say Jamal trade, signing Reed, trading for Rodgers. I feel like I'm forgetting one.
You
With the
could
fourth,
include trading up for AVT if you feel strongly about that. Trading up for Brees if you feel strongly about that. I know those have been somewhat controversial moves depending on who you ask.
so I think
And
I think the fourth one is literally in the loading phase that we'll find out this year, whether it was either going back in and getting Jermaine Johnson, trading up for Brees, or trading up for AVT.
yep, we
And
got to see. We got to see a little more
right,
from those
I
guys.
think
Yes.
AVT has the lowest floor of all of those. Like AVT right now is the comfiest one. Brees is in the middle, and then Jermaine's the spectrum. Like Jermaine
Yeah.
could be the worst of those 3 moves. Jermaine could also be the best of those 3 moves, because if Jermaine Johnson turns into a double-digit sack pass rusher, that's more valuable than a running back and a guard. As much as I love Brees and
Yeah.
AVT are 2 of my favorite, maybe my 2 favorite Jets on the team, besides
Yep.
Garrett Wilson. But like that's the one. So I would leave number 4 open, and I'm fascinated to kind of watch it this year. I'll say this though, right now, if I had to put one, and this is kind of putting, the cajones on the table here. Hiring Robert Saleh. Honestly, I believe Robert Saleh is going to be a really good coach for the Jets for a long time. So that would be number 4 for me.
Yeah, it's an important thing, whether you're looking at it positive or negatively. Like, he hired the coaching staff. Like, he hired Robert Saleh to hire the coaching staff. That was his move and his decision. He was empowered to do that. We like Robert Saleh a lot. We're a little more patient with him, I feel like, than most. We're going to learn a lot about him this year, game managing in a lot of critical games. But I do think that they will have enough success this year that he will end up being the longest tenured Jets coach that we've had for a while. Because if they win this year, he'll be here for another few years on top of where he's already been, which will put him sort of in that Rex territory, and hopefully he gets the playoff wins to go with it. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, the worst moves, I think, fair or unfair, you have to put drafting Zach Wilson at the top of the list, right? And you could say, look, there was no other choice. They had to take a quarterback. What other quarterback were they going to take? It was the consensus. Yes and no. The entire world knew the Jets were taking Zach Wilson from like mid-January. Like, it was like the worst kept secret in football. And we liked the pick. We were not overly critical of it at all when it happened. It just didn't work. And that's kind of the shitty, hard thing about being a GM. Like, you got to take the blame for it. And like, when you miss on a quarterback with the second overall pick in the draft,
Yeah,
it's on you. So there were other things they could have done. We've discussed them in videos like this before. They could have traded down. They could have drafted other positions and figured out quarterback later. The credit has been the pivot to be like, you know what, this doesn't work. We're going to get Aaron Rodgers. And still drafting Zach Wilson, like, he will go down as one of the worst top 5 picks ever, sadly, unless something radically changes, which it could. I've seen crazier things happen, but for now, it's got to be there. The entirety of the 2020 draft, which we were skeptical of in the moment. You could go back and listen to it. It's on this feed. Like, all the picks, we were like, Pirine, Zuniga, James Morgan. We were like, what are we doing here? And like,
I mean, I openly said on the BR broadcast I would take Wirfs over Becton.
Yes, yeah. And we were surprised they took Becton. And look, we saw some good things from Becton, but it's a results business. And it's not his fault that he got hurt. It's not Joe Douglas's fault, but it hasn't been it. And it's tough to have that miss. Now, hopefully it happens this year, but Becton headlining that class along with, Mims at the top, who's probably not going to be on the team this year, spoiler, and the rest of that class. And you can blame Gase, whatever. It's still on Douglas's resume. It has to be there. 2021 beyond Zach Wilson, not being able to have anything happen with the Elijah Moore asset and how the rest of that class is starting to look, with Nasruddin not really doing anything, with Jamie Sherwood not doing anything, with Pinnock being let go in favor of keeping Ashton Davis. Not that Pinnock's an all-world player, but they could use him right now, right? So there's
Yeah,
really no
safety depth is good.
Yeah, there's no depth to that class, and I'm a little concerned that Michael Carter could be going the way of Elijah Moore in terms of where his role goes here and if he's even on the team long term. So that's a class to keep an eye on. There's been some ugly things in free agency, like signing Jared Davis out of the gates, but there's a 1-year deal, so like not crazy like harm there. I'm trying to think if there's any other like this is like still loading, but Laken Tomlinson, Jordan Whitehead, big money there. Like, are these guys going to get bounced back? Because if they don't, that's a lot of sunk money into mediocre players. And I'm trying to think what else. They haven't really like taken backup quarterback seriously, and they're still not taking backup quarterback seriously, which is a problem. So we'll see. So there's a healthy mix, like any GM. There's a lot of good. There's a lot of bad. What bad ones come to mind for you?
I think a low key one is one you kind of just lightly hinted on is if they had a backup quarterback last year, the Jets make the playoffs, right? I mean, and we like that Mike White has done some good things. You know, when he was called upon, he was a fun story, but he couldn't stay healthy and he was just okay. So, I mean, here's the kicker too. How much credit can you give them for Mike White being the backup last year when he almost didn't make the team out of summer? Flacco was the backup, not Mike White. So it's kind of one of those things where
I
if
swear
they
to
took
God, by the
backup
way,
seriously,
if they bring Flacco back, I'm going to lose my mind. Continue.
yeah.
I'm sorry. I
No,
saw it. I saw it
yo,
rumored this week.
no, you gladly
My blood
can. That
pressure.
would be utterly ridiculous. So yeah, I would say quietly, maybe number one. No, number one, I mean, is Zach Wilson. That's like the Jamal Adams trade of this one. You kind of just staple it on there, and you're like, okay, this isn't
Gotta be
going
there.
anywhere. Like
Yes.
unfortunate circumstances, but yes. But a low key one definitely is not having a serious backup quarterback last year because, I mean, if the Jets won a couple more games, they easily and also it makes you wonder would Salah have been would they have not rushed Zach back or would they have turned quicker to the backup? They had no confidence in Flacco. Flacco was there was no confidence there. So that's a big one because it really impacted last season. It's a good one. I mean the 2020 draft as a whole is stapled on there. It was a bad draft and bad drafts are going to happen. You know, we liked the Mims pick, it didn't work. A lot of picks like you said, Joe, we did not like at all and they didn't work. But it's also how quickly they didn't work. Right, like
Yeah.
P. Ryan and Zuniga, like you knew right away. You're like, oh, these are nothing burgers
And
right
they're
here.
like out of the league basically. Yeah, unless I'm
Probably,
like something. Yeah.
yeah, they were very McCagnon picks.
Yes.
So it is, you know, that's how it goes. And then I'm trying to think. Oh man, it's
Signing
tricky.
Brashad Perriman and Pierre Desir. Those were his. I mean, that was a
Those
different.
are really bad signings. Yeah,
Those
you're
are
right.
really bad signings.
Those are really bad signings. So they never actually really helped Darnold, to be fair to Darnold. Darnold has his own problems that I've always said you could evaluate in a vacuum and explain why he's bad. But they also, to be fair, never did anything to lift him up. So yeah, I mean it's those are tough. Those are really, really tough. And um it'll be interesting to see how this year plays out to kind of know like, one that could be on the board after this year is that they swap picks and didn't take a tackle. We don't know. And
Fair
it
enough.
might not. It might not matter at all. Will McDonald might be great. So that's kind of the one, like I did the waiting and watching and loading for the last one. That would be my version of this, and we'll see how it goes.
Final Mount Rushmore, a broader one, a more nostalgic one, which we love.
But he's the best.
Mount Rushmore of greatest Jets moments. So I'll give a bigger picture one and then I'll give a personal one. Of course, winning Super Bowl III has to be number one. Probably, I would say, the most important Super Bowl ever, because if the Jets don't win that game, there may not be a Super Bowl after that. Read your history books. That's a real thing. Like, it could not have happened. It's a very important Super Bowl win for the league as a whole. As good as it gets with the guarantee, and the big, for a long time, considered one of the biggest upset in sports. Still considered one of the biggest upsets in sports. I think no matter when you were born, number two, the second most important win in franchise history was beating New England divisional round in 2010. That was, of a certain age, your Super Bowl. If you were a Jet fan, it was the happiest I ever was after a game. Unfortunately, the team treated it like I did, treat it like the Super Bowl. They weren't ready to play next week, and the rest is history. But that was as good as it gets with that team, that situation, the way that rivalry was for 2 years, and how big of an underdog the Jets were. to go in and just physically maul them and win that game. I don't know if people really remember how surprising it was at the time that they won that game. So that has to be on any list. I think once you get past that, it's going to depend how old you are and what you value.
Sure.
98 and 2000 winning home playoff games like that when they beat the Colts 41-0 at home in a playoff game. Hard to, beat that and beating Peyton Manning like that with Pennington. That was a fun team with a lot of fan favorites. Pennington, Santana Moss, Coles, Richie Anderson, Martin. That was a fun team to just be able to watch dominate like that at home, because the Jets have had such a lack of home playoff games. 98, Jacksonville, home, Keyshawn, rushing touchdown, receiving touchdown, fumble recovery, and interception. Fun, wild game that I was in attendance at, which I've alluded to a few times on. This was awesome. And once you get past that, there's things in the 80s. They always showed the highlights of the Jets beat the Dolphins 51-45 in overtime. I think it was like a regular season game, but Ken O'Brien threw 6 touchdowns. And I think that's always remembered as an all-time Jets game. I'm not born yet, but I've seen the highlights. And any other individual games that were super special, man, I'm trying to think anything else that comes to mind. There were some other lesser ones, like beating the Bengals to get in the playoffs and close down
every
Giant
Revis
Stadium.
playoff game.
Every Revis playoff game where you were watching that level of greatness was awesome. Yeah. So those are the things that come to mind for me. There are a lot of just wins versus individual moments, but that's what clicks for me individually. Every time they've beaten the Giants or Patriots, those have been really fun moments. Even the 2015 win in within the span of 3 weeks against New England and against the Giants was such a fun stretch. They beat the Giants in overtime. They beat the Pats in overtime. To do that over the course of 3 weeks as a Jet fan is kind of as good as it gets. So that's my happy nostalgic rant. I saw a couple people put the Rodgers trade, can't do it yet. Got to see it on the field, and I can't make it an individual transaction. It has to be an on-field moment for me.
Yeah, same. I mean, nah, you can't operate that way. What's a weird, sneaky one for me? Because it wasn't during a good season, but I definitely, I don't know, it resonates with me as a kid, is when Curtis Martin ran through the Steelers in the snow.
Yeah.
That's a weird one.
What a fun game. 6-0, I think the Jets won.
6-0. They won on 2 field goals. He had 30 carries. He had almost 200 rushing yards. That's a weird one that sticks in my brain. It's not Mount Rush. There's 2 ways to do this, right? You can answer the question of what are the Mount Rushmore moments of the actual Jets history, which I think you did a good job covering most of that. And then it's more importantly, because being a sports fan is such an individual experience, or not an individual experience, the experience you share with family, friends, things like that, or you make friends from it, moments to you. So I'll do my Mount Rushmore. I would say Jets beating the Patriots at New England in the divisional round is my Super Bowl, of my life, by the way.
Yep.
Because I am a Rangers fan. When they won the Cup, I was barely even walking, so it doesn't really mean anything as much as watching the highlights is fun. I didn't experience it. I'm a Knicks fan. Obviously I'm a Jets fan, and I'm a Mets fan. The Mets making the World Series a couple of times has been special, but and they did have won one in my lifetime. The Jets beating New England in the playoffs is my personal Super Bowl, which is kind of sad, but also that's how special it was at the time. Yep. And I was 18 or 19, so I actually really enjoyed it. It wasn't what's happening, you know what I mean? When you're a kid, you're you don't appreciate it as much. That's number 1 for me. And I'm hoping that it's surpassed soon. Please, can it be surpassed soon?
Yes, please.
God. I think number 2 has to be the Monday Night Miracle.
That was awesome. I should have mentioned that. Yeah.
I think number 2 has to be the Monday Night Miracle. Still really, really young, but I remember, I think, being allowed to stay up. Yep. And just really realizing how unique this was. And you do understand comebacks when you're a kid. That is one thing you really do grasp, is comebacks and the thrill of comebacks. Oh man, this is kind of interesting. I don't want to use recency bias. I'm desperately trying to avoid very recent things. The Jets win over the Browns last year was the most fun I had as a Jets fan in a very long time.
In our recording time together, Badlands recording time together, that was about as fun and surprising as a win as we've had. right? It
Yeah,
was just
it's
like
not on my
totally out of
Mount
nowhere.
Rushmore of personal moments, but it is a lot of fun. When the Jets beat the Giants on the field goal in overtime, I think that was 15.
Yep.
That's a really special one to me because I was out in California for work, and it was the first time I ever watched NFL football in the morning. I just started traveling for work a lot, and I was out at a bar in California where it was all Jets and Giants fans because LA is just a different mosh of people from all over the country. That was a really special win. 2015 obviously didn't end the way we hoped. And then, 2009 was a lot of fun. That team, I think all of 2009 might be on there because the Jets were a little down and out at the time and they'd been laughed at.
Yep.
And Rex came in and Rex was just like stuck his middle finger up to everyone. And when you first watched his intro presser, you were like, this guy's kind of bold. Like, I'm kind of nervous. And then when he
Yep.
started to win a couple games, you're like, damn, I will fuck with this guy. Like, this team
Yes.
is fun. He is confident. He is one of us.
Yep.
That was a very special year, despite the passing offense being dreadful. And I went to some of those games with my dad, and I just remember sitting there being like, we just need to not throw an interception and
Yeah.
we'll win the game. So,
7 of 15 for like 58 yards, like one
the Buffalo
touchdown. No
game.
picks. Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
like
I think he
nothing.
threw 5. Yeah.
Yeah, this is ridiculous.
Yeah. Being a Jets fan's a very weird existence. It really is. Because it's not like, if we were, I don't know, Seattle fans, you'd be like, oh, and it's like a very random fan base to throw around. You'd be like, oh, Legion of Boom as a whole is one. My Mount Rushmore for me with the Jets like has Revis on it. Like
Yeah,
Jets beating New
getting
England.
to watch him. Yeah.
Yeah, Jets beating New England and Darrell Revis. I don't really care about the rest. And hopefully there'll be moments that I do care about enough. But those two things for me are the most important things I've ever witnessed as a Jets fan.
Listen, it makes sense, and he's going in the Hall of Fame this year, which is going to be awesome. Before we drop and go over to the record the pod, we gotta keep the consistency going with the new segment I tested with Will last week. Want you to name any Jet game from the Drought era, just off the top of your head, and I'm going to tell you everything I can remember about it. And the reason I was reminded to do it because I remember when you brought up the Monday Night Miracle. Lavernius Cole's first career touchdown, Jermaine Wiggins touchdown, Wayne Corbett touchdown, and then the Jumbo Elliott touchdown were the 4 touchdowns for the comeback. But Cole's first career touchdown is in there. Now you got to give me a random game from 2011 to last year. Last year's too recent. I'm just going to riff off the top of my head what I can remember, and then we're going to the pod.
This is a lot of fun. What a dreadful exercise in the best possible way. Oh man. How about when the Jets opened up against was it against the Browns when McCown started? Was it a week 1 game? I need to look this up.
With McCown starting for the Browns or starting for the Jets? Because they played the Browns with McCown started the game and got hurt and helicoptered, and Manziel came in.
No, I think I've mixed up season. No, yes. Okay. No, I've mixed up seasons here. No, I think I have it. You're right. Man, yeah, McCown played against was it Demario Davis that hit him?
Yeah. McCown got helicoptered by Demario Davis.
Yes.
Manziel came in.
What season was this?
2015. That was Fitzpatrick.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. But wasn't it week 1 or no?
Yes, it was week 1.
Okay, I'm not losing my mind. Yes. McCown helicopter from a Demario Davis hit in the end zone.
Yes. Manziel comes in through a bomb for a touchdown, beat Cromartie, and the Jets were losing in the first half. And then they came back and won pretty comfortably in the second half. Because Fitz, I remember, had like a dumb turnover late in the first half. And it was like, oh my God. But then they got it together. They were like clearly the better team. But yes, McCown started for them. Fitz was just recently the starter because of what had happened with Geno. And if I recall correctly, both like Marshall and Decker were like right out of the gate, like really good. And they helped put the game away in the second half. The Jets won relatively comfortably in that one, and then won on Monday night against the Colts in week 2, where Revis had a pick, David Harris had a pick, and like that's what was like, oh wow, they're going to be good this year because we all thought they were going to get killed by like Luck and the Colts on prime time.
That's right,
and they won like pretty comfortably.
Didn't Calvin Pryor make a play?
Yes, he had a pick, Louisville Slugger. They had like the one flash year where we're like, oh wow, Calvin Pryor is going to be good. Didn't last. And then I think they beat Miami in London to go 3-0, and then they finally lost to Philly in week 4. But now I'm going to ruin the whole season. That's how we're wrapping. We'll bring it back when we do the video next week. And now we're going to go over to the pod war room. Discord's awesome. Tell more people to join. Not too many more people. We want to keep it pretty exclusive, but appreciate the chatter. And we will talk to you later this week, specifically you in deep dive with the Dan Hansis interview, which will be fun.